But a new report suggests that UK immigration levels will place huge pressure on housing, on schools and the NHS without action now to curb numbers. That is what senior Tories have warned. Well, as I say, joining me now is the Research Director at the Centre for Policy Studies, Carl Williams. Good morning, afternoon, sorry, I should say to you. You're at the Centre for Policy Studies who've issued this report. Tell us what you're saying.
Yes, so the government has a housing target for England of 300,000 houses per year.
Sorry, can we all just have a laugh at that? When was the last time we reached a housing target being built?
Well, this is a new target that came in 2020, but last time levels were like that, 1960s maybe.
Excellent, well played, everyone.
It was, I think, 240,000 last year. So we're falling short already. And that government housing target, there's various factors that go into it, but it assumes net migration of 170,000 people to England per year. And now, of course, we've not seen levels of immigration to the UK or specifically to England that low for over a decade now.
And in fact, there are many multiples of that, 745,000 net immigration only a year or two ago, and more, 650,000, was it last year?
672
Sorry, I got it wrong by under 20,000. I mean, so we're not building enough houses. Well, not building enough houses for people who are already here. Certainly not building enough houses. God, I've gone on about this, haven't I, everybody? For the people who are arriving. But even the predictions, projections of how many people are going to come. I mean, they're from the ONS yesterday. They are massive underestimates of what is likely to be the numbers because they've been wrong so many times before, and they're nowhere close to where they've been. But even then, the projections for our house building isn't set to keep track.
No, you're completely right there. The long-term population projections, 2010, they assumed net migration of 140,000 a year. We're now up to an average of 405,000 for the next 15 years. And it's 500,000 for the next few years, settling down to 300,000.
Yeah. And we need to stress, this is legal migration. This isn't people arriving on dinghies from Calais, although there are too many of those in the tens of thousands, that they're not making up the bulk of this. We are talking about people who, law-abiding people who apply for a visa, they come here to work, they are given a visa by our government, by our authorities, and they often bring their families. I think the more people come here as dependents than come here to work, which is perhaps a factor we need to take into account in terms of the impact on the country. But these people they want to come and make a better life for themselves and work, and they do that, and they do that legally. But we don't have anywhere for them to live.
Well, that's the thing. I think everyone accepts that some level of migration is good for the country. Yep. It can bring benefits to growth. But at this level, we just can't keep pace in terms of housing, but also in terms of the rest of our infrastructure and our public services. So
we talk a lot on this show about housing. The mantra of the show is build more houses, and we need that. Even if we literally pulled up the drawbridge tomorrow, no one else came to this country, we would still need to build, let's face it, a couple of million more homes that people might actually want to live in with, I don't know, gardens, something where people can actually put roots down and their children can have somewhere to play. I mean, that's the sort of homes that people want. We need whole cities built, and yet we just bring in whole cities of populations, don't we? Instead, in the next, 10 years, we're looking at 12 years, we're looking at effectively 5 more Birminghams populations being brought in, our second city. It's extraordinary numbers. No one asked the British people if they wanted this. To the extent that they have been asked, they've said, no, we don't.
Oh, repeatedly, every election since 1992, basically.
Yeah.
And if you look at the latest YouGov polling, 64% of people say migration has been too high over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And that applies to virtually every demographic, apart, ironically, from the very youngest group, who are also the ones at the forefront of the housing crisis.
Who are actually the ones most impacted.
Yes,
exactly.
absolutely.
But I think for a lot of them, even when answering a poll, they think, well, I need to be a nice person. But again, there's nothing xenophobic about this. This is economics, isn't it? But it's not just housing. This report focuses on all the other big impacts on our infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, you can trace this across all sorts of areas of public provision. We haven't built a water reservoir in 30 years now in England.
We've got. Am I right thinking right now we have 10 million more people than we had 20 years ago?
Close
but
to
we've
that,
not.
Yes.
But for some reason they don't use any extra water.
Yes, definitely not an extra 140 litres a day each.
No, absolutely not. So why would we build another reservoir? We've not built a power station either, have we?
Not like a gas or a nuclear power station.
Something that's reliable.
Yes, and of course Hinkley's been delayed again, so that's 2029 and 2030.
So
we're trying to electrify
that explains why we have pressure on our water, pressure on our energy supplies as well. We've got more people, more demand, but we don't have any extra capacity. In fact, some of it's going down.
Exactly. It's basic supply demand. We're not building enough new infrastructure, and we're bringing in too many pressures.
And we wonder why our streets are crowded, our trains are crowded when they're running. And of course, for an awful lot of people, this is where it's a real pinch point. It's about schools, isn't it? And I think a lot of people who live perhaps, leafy suburbs in rural villages perhaps don't understand the pressure that a lot of people in inner cities, and it's not just London, they feel about getting their kid into the one decent school that's got a good Ofsted rating in the local area. But of course, the pressure for that is huge. Well, of course, there's more pressure because there's more children of that age.
Yeah, the Conservative MP Neil O'Brien's done a lot of work on this recently.
I'm not a fan of Neil O'Brien's because he's not a Democrat, in my view, but carry on.
He makes a very good point on this, that the immigration debate gets bogged down a bit because perceptions of the pressures vary very widely. It's very different in London to somewhere where the white British population might be only 2% of the local authority. Yeah. And that's reflected.
But again, I don't think it's a white issue, a black issue.
No, of course, it's just
I don't think it's a colour issue. I think that's... Britain has such a long tradition of this not being an issue. I mean, we don't live in the 1950s anymore. We really don't. We've seen incredible, integration and assimilation over the years of many different groups. But it's the sheer numbers
precisely
that has been the issue. And of course, we discussed a lot on the show yesterday, the cultural issues and different values. And of course, that ties in with conversation we're having about Mike Freer as well. We'll come back to that. But again, it's also pressure on the NHS. We're constantly told by those on the left that, yes, but, the NHS only survives because of an immigrant population. If we didn't have all these foreign-born and foreign-trained nurses and doctors, the NHS would collapse, which is weird because, countries like Germany, they seem to manage to train enough of their own people.
Yeah, you're right. And again, there's been a long period when we've not been training enough doctors and nurses domestically. And that points to the fact that there are some very deep structural problems which have been papered over with immigration. There's always the temptation to pull that lever, get the short-term numbers up a bit and leave the big, difficult choices for later. And
of course, we know there's the big issue, of course, in terms of pay for often low-skilled labour, where we simply haven't seen those pay increases over the last 20 years because there's been a pretty much unlimited supply, first of Eastern European workers willing to work on very low wages, often, living in bedsits effectively, for a few months at a time, going back home, sending money home, very different expectations of life than, say, a young, married couple who've grown up in Britain. Many of those Eastern Europeans settled, staying in this country, some planning to go abroad. We saw a lot going home, not because of Brexit, but really because of the COVID lockdowns, wanting to be with their families. And we saw that with Britons returning to this country as well. But nevertheless, huge issues there, which have not been addressed, where people have not been able to negotiate higher pay. They've not been able to be more valued by employers because employers, well, I'll just import somebody.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is particularly an acute problem in the social care sector, adult social care. Mm-hmm. And we all know there's a big crisis there and something's going to have to be done.
But they don't pay enough. Yeah, it's hard work. I've been in a care home a lot when I had an aunt in the care home. It's really very hard, I think sometimes very difficult work. I mean, really quite upsetting, I think, emotional work, if you're doing it right, in terms of the state of a lot of the people who are in care homes. And we pay people a pittance to do it. We don't value it.
Yeah, I mean, it's often more better for these people to work in a supermarket, stacking shelves.
So funnily enough, that's what they do.
Yeah, indeed, because it's,
OK, what's the solution?
Sorry.
You look wonderfully. What's the solution to all of this, then?
What's the solution? So obviously the government's announced some measures which are going to help with bringing down numbers in the medium term.
They've announced lots of measures over the years, but they never actually do it.
I think ultimately we're heading towards a cap on the numbers, and that cap has to be set according to housing, infrastructure, school places.
But if we had a cap on the number based on the facts as they are on the ground right now, that cap would be virtually zero, unless you're a Nobel Prize-winning scientist.
Well, it'd be net migration cap. So remember, if you've got 1 million people coming, then 500,000 leaving. If you wanted to get it down to a lower number, you could still have a fair amount of churn there. Yeah. But it has to be.
I'm not sure I'm very happy with a lot of people leaving. I mean, I want people free to leave. Wasn't in favour of those rules in lockdown. But I like young people. I like our brightest, our best, our most adventurous. I really want to make a go of life. The sort of people who are willing, and I've always felt this about immigrants, who are willing to up sticks and go to another country. You've got to sort of get up and go. We should be encouraging. But if our best youngsters are going, I don't think I've got a future in this country. I can't afford to buy a home. I can't train as a doctor, which was my dream or whatever it is. I would rather they knew that they could, or felt they could make their home here and stay here.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I agree with all of that, but the emigration data suggests that the number of British citizens leaving has been fairly steady for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And of course, that might be an issue with data collection, which I know the ONS are working on, doing a very good job on that. But there's clearly that sentiment out there that why stay here? The sense of malaise.
Yes.
If you're young, then go to Australia
exactly.
or America.
It's the weather. What I don't understand is people moving to a rainier country. That doesn't. Philip Ingram, you've been listening to all of this. What do you want to say?
Well, it's interesting. I think with the housing bit, does the study look at what the average family size is that comes in? Because if the net migration's 400,000, I'm just doing this for easy maths, and the average family size is 4, you need 100,000 houses.
Yeah.
But the real pressure, therefore, is on schools, NHS, and everything else. And we have to recognise that I think the majority of those that are coming in and through the legal migration routes that are doing this are coming in to work, to pay taxes, to contribute to society.
They are coming to that. However, the reality is that actually they're not net contributors because they're largely low-skilled and low-paid, and they're being subsidised with housing benefits. So we're constantly, these are working people. Yes, that's great. They're working, but they're contributing more from the public services and from other people's taxes than they're actually contributing themselves.
And does the study look at that in bits and pieces?
No, this doesn't. Although we will be doing some work on that in the not too distant future.
Because I think you're getting that will inform the debate
But when the debate has for so many years, and I've been writing about this for decades now. Obviously, I've been doing it since I was in nappies, everybody. But when you talk about this and say, oh, I'm not quite sure that mass uncontrolled immigration is a good idea economically, let alone the cultural issues, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Then people, everyone just shouts racist, xenophobe, big attack.
It should never be uncontrolled, and there needs to be control mechanisms. And I don't think there's enough work being put in to understand the impact and to get those right control mechanisms.
But isn't that because the people making the decisions don't live with the impacts? They're not low-skilled. Their children are all right to get into university and get those higher-paid jobs. They're not competing with those immigrant workers. They're for housing, for jobs. Mm-hmm. For school places, for a GP appointment. They live in a sort of echelon above that, don't they?
I think that's clearly a factor. And that is also, the other element to that is the Home Office, its job is to, part of its job is to control the borders and help.
Part of its job.
Yes, get numbers down, say. But there's always pressure from other departments, big spending departments, to get the numbers up. The Treasury likes numbers for growth. Department for Education likes numbers up to prop up universities. The Health Department always want more people coming in. So there's all those institutional pressures as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Carl Williams from the Centre for Policy Studies, where he's a research director. Thank you for that.